Where else would you rather be? I'm Paul Clifford, CEO of the Penn State Alumni Association. Welcome to the People of Penn State. Each week on the podcast, you can expect to hear the voices of Penn Staters talking about what they're passionate about, and you can expect to feel the pride and the power of the Penn State network. The People of Penn State podcast can be found on Apple Podcasts or your podcast app of choice. Subscribe and give us a rating. Ratings and reviews are the best way to help other Penn Staters find these great stories that we share every week on the People of Penn State. So today's guest, I'm really excited to talk to Jim Ivler. After 30 years of representing professional football players, Jim has proven that he is a top-tier NFL player agent. After graduating from Penn State in 1990 with his BA in History and Widener University School of Law in Harrisburg in 1993, with his JD, Jim practiced for 4 years at the renowned law firm of Spadaro and Hilson in Woodbridge, New Jersey. Since joining Sportstar in 1997, Jim has been instrumental in building the company into one of the largest NFL agencies in the country. Jim has distinguished himself as an expert contract negotiator, one who has an excellent understanding of the NFL and its policies, and is an agent who works diligently and tirelessly for the best interests of his clients. As an attorney, Jim is essential to the success of Sportsstars by using his legal expertise to guarantee that every contract meets the desires of his clients. He handles all appeals on behalf of his clients when they are fined by the NFL. We'll maybe get some stories about that in just a minute. But please welcome Jim Ivler to the People of Penn State podcast. Jim, how are you today?
Doing great, Paul. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, looking forward to our conversation. But before we dive into the work you're doing today, talk about your Penn State journey. How did you become a Penn State Nittany Lion?
The normal answer would be that my father went here, class of 61. And so you'd figure I spent a lot of time as a kid up in State College. Not true. For whatever reasons, we never really came up for a visit. And I went through a normal college selection process of visiting a whole bunch of schools. And as my mother loves to tell the story, it took about 11 seconds walking down College Avenue when we pulled into State College for me to turn around and say, this is where I'm going. So it's one of those things where you get a feeling right away that it's the place for you. And that's certainly the case with Penn State.
So I mentioned in the intro that you were an undergraduate history major. I was also a history major. I don't know if your experience was the same, but I was a history major, but I don't know any historians now. So talk about the study of history and how that led you to do what you're doing today.
I can't really honestly say that the history degree has played a big role in what I'm doing today. It was just something where I took a couple of classes early on in my career there. I didn't come in as a history major, but it sort of clicked with me, and I thought that would be good. And after college, I'm not sure what you do with a history degree, maybe be a general or go to law school. So I chose the law school path, and it was really very early on in my law school first year where it kind of hit me that maybe being a player agent for professional athletes would be something that would interest me and suit my skill set.
Excellent. As a student, what were some of the things that you were involved in while you were here in Happy Valley?
I guess primarily my fraternity. I was, in a fraternity, and it was, of course, a lot of fun and made some great friends. And by my senior year, I was president, and I think it was my sophomore or junior year, I was rush chairman. And although law school is not bad prep work for being a player agent, I've often said that my one semester as rush chairman of my fraternity probably prepared me for this job better than 3 years of law school did, because first and foremost, it is a sales job, being an agent. And so that sort of came in handy, that fraternity experience.
This is the People of Penn State. I'm Paul Clifford. I'm joined today by Jim Ivler. He is a renowned NFL player agent. So Jim, you graduate from Penn State, you go to Widener. Was becoming a player agent on your radar screen yet, or was that something that started to materialize while you were in law school?
It really was the first week when I got to that law school. I saw that they did not have a sports law society. And so within a week, I became the founder and president of the Widener School of Law Sports Law Society. And in that role, we had different guest speakers come in. And one of the first ones I had come in was a baseball agent. And it sort of gave me the idea. And then once I graduated and started working for a law firm, they started giving me a little bit of time and seed money to pursue my dream. And I pursued football for, really just practical reasons at the time. At least in football, as opposed to most of the other team sports, you can get some pretty quick feedback. You sign clients around the new year, and about 4 months later, the NFL draft happens. So you have an idea whether or not you have any players in the league or not. So the other sports, it's usually a much longer road for players to reach the top level of their sport. And I didn't have time for that at the time. And so that's kind of how I chose football. There were no pre-existing contacts or anything like that.
Yeah, before we dive fully into the sports agent world, talk a little bit about the work that you were doing at Spadaro and Hilson. What kind of law were you practicing there?
General corporate and commercial firm. We have mid-sized corporate clients, litigation and contracts and that sort of thing. And it was fine, but it clearly wasn't my passion. And I think they recognized that too, which is why they gave me some of that time and seed money to try and pursue what I was doing. And I had some small level of success, but it also became pretty clear that to really hit it in this industry, probably being able to latch on with a larger company would be the most likely thing. And at the time when I joined Sportstars in 1997, it was only 2 agents, and they had about 12 clients in the league. And cut to about a quarter century later, we have about a dozen agents under our roof, and 150, 160 players in the NFL. And it's been a nice steady growth. And our company is very, very unique in this industry. It's a very volatile and unstable industry, and we are the model of stability. Sportstars, as I said, third guy in 25 years ago, and the partners that have followed me have been with us for 20 years, 18, 17. No one ever leaves, it seems, and that's very unusual in this industry.
Well, so you were in at the ground floor essentially at Sportstars. Talk about that first year. Talk about chasing those first clients. You said it's more like sales than it is anything an attorney might experience. Talk about those first players that you first signed and what that process looked like.
Yeah, I mean, the early years are certainly different than now, and although the workload and the hours that I put in doesn't seem to have changed, it is the stereotypical 24/7 job. We are available at all times for our clients. There are no business hours. There's no weekends. There's no vacations. Whenever a client calls, that's when we're ready to roll. And early on, I did some things even like filming clients that were not considered top prospects and weren't invited to the NFL Combine or all-star games and whatnot. I'd go out there with an old school video camera and actually film them running 40s and doing other workout type drills and sending them to the teams and going into editing studios to edit those tapes. And so it was kind of really a grassroots building from the ground up. And luckily that didn't last too long. And of course, once you start to build up a book of clients and you can use those names to help you recruit, it theoretically becomes a little bit easier. And although it is a highly competitive business, and every year seems to be a battle, and really whether you're recruiting a first rounder or a late rounder, it doesn't seem to be that much different because there's just a lot of agents out there and talking to these players, and so differentiating yourself is of course key.
Yeah. Who was the first? Who was the first client that you had that actually broke into the NFL that got you thinking, well, all right, I can do this. I can make this kind of a long term. This is going to be the rest of my career.
Well, even when I was working with the law firm, I had a couple of undrafted rookie free agents that came out of Rutgers. And of course, you want guys drafted, but if they don't get drafted, they sign right after the draft as undrafted rookie free agents. So I figured at that point, if I really can get some backing and maybe get some names under my belt, I'd be able to do this. And so that was back in the mid 90s, 94, 95 maybe. Took me a while to break into Penn State. And interestingly enough, the first client I ever signed from Penn State was 20 years ago, ended up being a first round draft pick in the 2003 draft, Michael Haynes, who was drafted 14 overall going to the Chicago Bears. So it took me a while to get into Penn State, but thankfully it's been a pretty consistent stream of our guys since then.
That's amazing. So many of us are familiar with the movie Jerry Maguire, right? How accurate is that? How in terms of what your day-to-day looks like, what your service to your clients looks like? Was it made for Hollywood, or is there some parallels to what you're doing?
Probably one of the most frequent questions I get asked, but no, sure, there are definitely some things that happen. I mean, some of the cutthroat things that you saw in that movie, for sure, and the all-encompassing nature of the job. It's I often say that in any given year, I always have two daughters, both of whom are Penn State graduates at this point, and in any given year, 20 to 25. Well, now I consider them sons with my age. For a lot of years, I considered them younger brothers that I was counseling. But it really does become all-consuming, and you get so involved in players' lives. It's probably one of the big misconceptions, and maybe that movie cleared it up a little bit, that it's not just the business aspect, but you saw the personal aspect in that movie, dealing with players behind the scenes and their families and any topics or issues that come up, because that's really what our goal is to remove all hassles and stress and issues off of the plates of our clients, no matter how mundane or serious, so they can focus on the task at hand, which is trying to be a really great NFL player. And that's no easy task, for sure.
Absolutely. You said it took you a little while to break into Penn State, but then it has been pretty consistent thereafter. Talk about some of the Penn Staters that you have represented and what they've gone on to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's and I'm just as proud as some of them that didn't make a huge mark in the NFL as those that did. I mean, in terms of longtime veterans that I've represented that Penn State fans would know, probably the two highest profile and longest tenured players in the NFL would be Tamba Hali and Robbie Gould. Who, Tamba was the 2006 draft. Robbie was 2005. Tamba recently retired a few years ago, and Robbie is still kicking unbelievably at age 40. But like I said, I mean, I also represent Deion Barnes, who had 1 year in the NFL, and as most people know, is now our defensive line coach and is a rock star as far as I'm concerned. And I'm just as proud of Deion as I am with this guy here, Donovan Smith, who was the same draft year, 2015. They came out the same year, and one has made his mark in the NFL, and the other as a fast rising coaching star.
Any interesting stories? I'm sure you have interesting stories all throughout your career, but any interesting stories or unusual moments with working with Penn Staters or any of your other clients?
Yeah, well, as you can imagine, most people that have known me these years keep saying the same thing, that I should be writing a book or
Right.
maybe a screenplay with all of the stories. But I don't think there's any doubt of all the Penn State clients, if there was one screenplay to write, it would be about Tamba Hali and the process that we went through back in 2006, his rookie year, to bring his mother over from Liberia in Africa to this country. As a lot of Penn State fans know, Tamba came to this country as a 10-year-old, and his father brought him over, and his brother, and he had to leave his mother behind. He had not seen her for 12 years. And some efforts were made by Penn State at the time he was a student to bring his mother over. It didn't work out. And when I signed Tamba, I asked him the same question I asked all of my clients at the time. What can I do right now while you focus on preparing for the draft and the training that we put players through for the combine and whatnot to increase their draft stock? I said, what can we do to remove any problems or issues or hassles off of your plate? And he said, well, I don't know if you know the story. And of course I did, especially since I was born and raised in northern New Jersey. And when Tamba came over, that's where he settled, in northern New Jersey, Bergen County. He said, been trying to get my mother over to this country for a lot of years, haven't been able to do it. Can you make it happen? So you become a football agent. You don't think you're going to be dealing with Liberian immigration officials, but that's what that player needed at that time while he was focusing on the draft. And took a while, but by the time he was a rookie, just before his season started in Kansas City, we actually turned it into an HBO Inside the NFL feature where you see me walking off the plane with his mother in Kansas City, physically putting her in his brother's arms. So the process that we went through, though, to get her here, that could be a major motion picture for sure.
That's an amazing story. And Tamba's one of the all-time greats, one of the all-time great Penn Staters, one of the all-time great people associated with this university. Just a fantastic human.
Agreed. He is a specially unique guy, and he's a guy that not only do I still have a relationship with, but I would argue since he's been retired the last 3-4 years, I maybe have done more work for him the last 3-4 years than I did the last 3-4 years of his career. And what I mean by that is the last 3-4 years of his 11-year career, he was pretty much on autopilot. He had the NFL beat. He knew how much he could practice. The Chiefs pretty much let him do whatever he wanted as long as he could sack the quarterback on Sundays. And thank goodness he did that, very well. Now, the first 6 or 7 years of representing him, it was like representing 10 players. There was that much work that went into it. It got easier towards the end. But once his career was over, he then had more time to pursue things off the field. And so when I sign a player, I tell them I don't look at this as just a business relationship. I'm there for life if they want me. We only charge our clients, of course, while they're in the NFL. So I've done countless tasks and hours of work for Tom the last 3-4 years and, haven't charged him a penny, and I'm more than happy to do it. He's part of our family, we feel, and he's just such a special guy, and any help he needs. And I tell my guys all the time, the goal from the NFL needs to be achieving generational wealth while you're in the league. And then that generational wealth really allows the transition to life after football to make it so that a player can pursue whatever he wants. In Tamba's case, one of the things he wanted to pursue was the music industry. Right. So, I kind of dove in deep with him and really helped him throughout this whole process. And he's got his own record label, and he's a producer, and he's an artist himself. And a lot of hours have gone into it. And but that's the goal, to help our guys, achieve that generational wealth so that they can pursue whatever their passion is after football, and not because they need that paycheck. And whatever help they want from me to get them there after football, we're there just as if they were still in the NFL.
So I'm sure that there are a number of metrics by what you measure success, but I would think the ultimate metric is the size of contracts that you're able to negotiate for your clients. So where do some of your clients stand on the all-time NFL earnings list?
Well, I couldn't tell you about the all-time earnings list, but I can tell you, going back to Tamba, that he stands right now, and most people will be surprised to hear this, as the highest earning Penn State player in the history of the NFL. Wow. Has been for several years. I believe Allen Robinson is about to pass him probably this year with his contract. Donovan Smith, one of my other guys, is going to pass him in 2024. So for many years, though, now Tamba has stood at the top of the all-time Penn State earnings list. So, and yes, obviously, it's how we get paid, of course, how much our clients make. So yes, that is a measuring stick. But in this ultra-competitive business that we are in, we measure ourselves really every step of the way. In the recruiting process with the players that we sign. Of course, the draft, the NFL draft, is sort of our Super Bowl every year, and kind of our calendar year really revolves around the draft, which just took place, of course, a couple of weeks ago, and the success in the draft is another huge measuring stick. And we were thrilled this year from a Penn State standpoint. I represent Brenton Strange, who, to the surprise of many, went in the second round of the draft to Jacksonville. And so that's another measuring stick. And then, of course, guiding our clients through the early stages of the NFL career, trying to set them up for that second contract, because really, unless you're a top 15 or 20 pick in the NFL, achieving that generational wealth only happens when you get that second contract. And then if you're really blessed, maybe a third and a fourth contract.
Yeah, you anticipated my next question. I wanted to talk about Brenton Strange. And so I want to talk about it just in terms of the entire process, though. Like when was your first contact with Brenton? How did you make the decision, or how did he make the decision that you were going to be his agent? And then what do you do all along the way to prepare them for the combine, and then prepare them for the NFL draft. What does that process look like from probably mid to late December into April and May?
Sure. Well, the process starts pretty soon right after the NFL draft. Like I said, our calendar year runs draft to draft, and we begin recruiting players. We focus on one draft class at a time, not looking to recruit the following year's players until the draft goes by. And so the summer months, June and July, before college players hit their training camps, are big recruiting months for us. And that's when we initially met Brenton. And, I had, of course, heard so many good things about him from a lot of my other Penn State clients in the league. And that's obviously how we get a lot of feedback from our current clients about their former teammates, to get a sense, not so much of what type of a football player they are, because we get that information from the NFL scouts, but more what type of person are they, how hard of a worker, does the current client feel that his former teammate would be a good culture fit for myself and our company. And when we find those guys, they become a priority. And I'll always remember, it meant a lot to me the first time I met Brenton. He said, I know who you are, and I know what your history is here, and the players that you represented, and what a Penn Stater you are, and that means a lot to me. And that's what he said, and that meant a lot to me, hearing that. And so we keep up the recruiting process throughout the season, being respectful of a player's time, of course. But then once that season's over, it has hit the ground running, literally. So I was out at the Rose Bowl this year and went out to dinner right after the big win with Brenton and his family, where we made it official and put pen to paper. And, it begins right after that with the combine training program. Brenton chose to go to an outstanding combine training facility down in Pensacola, Florida. We source these training facilities to make sure that our clients have first class, first rate everything, training and nutrition and physical therapy and doctors and masseuses and mental conditioning coaches and interview coaches. There's a lot that goes into the All-Star games and the NFL Combine that a lot of fans don't realize when they're just watching on TV. There's a lot of behind the scenes prep work that goes into it. Players are working very hard for a couple of months. And then once we get past the Combine, we're into March, where Pro Day is. And of course, Brenton crushed it at Penn State Pro Day this year, which was in late March. And there's individual workouts where, in this case, tight end coaches would come in and work him out privately. And then there's official visits that players take in the month of April to NFL teams. NFL teams are only permitted to bring 30 players into their facilities in the month of April leading up to the draft, to sort of give them one more last look before they use a draft pick on them. And that takes us up to the late April draft. So that's kind of like a normal cycle of a year for us.
Yeah, it's I'm thinking of the parallels between graduating from law school and pursuing the NFL, right? The process you've just described is probably not too dissimilar to studying for the bar, right? There's that intermediate period that you have to probably work as hard as you're ever going to work, in between the end of one period of your career, right? The end of the college football season, and then becoming a professional at what you do. How much interaction do you have with the teams on behalf of a player like Brenton pre-draft? And I guess what I'm getting at is, when you say it's to everybody's surprise that he went in the second round, how much influence does an agent have on where their clients get picked and where their clients go?
Yeah, I get asked that question a lot too, and I'll give you a typical lawyer answer: is it depends. First and foremost, of course, it's the teams making these evaluations, and if they love the player or don't love the player, it's pretty hard for an agent to change that opinion. But there's a couple of loose ends that sometimes reputable agents, I feel, can certainly tie up and make teams feel more comfortable about players. Certainly if there's any off the field issues, which of course in Brenton's case was not the case. He's an outstanding person. There was no issues to have to diffuse whatsoever on that. But a lot of times what the teams are looking for feedback from me is what has he been like in these few months leading up to the draft? How hard has he been working? How quickly did he take to the coaching at the combine training facility? Those types of things. And we're having constant conversations with all 32 NFL teams and doing what you would imagine, our best to try and increase their draft stock and pitting the teams against each other, trying to make the teams have some concern that Team X, which also needs a tight end in this case, for example, has been all over the player. And so you better take him when it's your pick in this round if you want him. And when I said, much to the surprise of a lot of people, that he went in the second round, wasn't necessarily a surprise for me. I thought that there was a pretty good chance that he could be a second round pick, at worst, certainly a third round pick. So we knew he was going to go on Friday night. And just to make a point about something you'd said just before that about kind of the similarities of coming out of law school and studying for the bar and getting ready to start your professional career is, analogous to training for the combine. And then you come to the big day. One big difference that most fans don't really think about when you come to that big draft day, we just take it as gospel. This is how the process works. You get drafted and you go to whatever city you go to. There's not a lot of businesses that are like that. When I came out of law school and passed the bar, if someone had just called me one day and said, "Hey, you're going to go work for a law firm in Green Bay, Wisconsin," I would have said, "You want to bet?" That's would have been my answer. But these guys, of course, go happily and willingly. And so I think sometimes we forget just what an unusual process this really is, that the player at that stage of his career, can't dictate and really pretty much has no control over where he has to move to and begin a new life.
I want to switch gears a little bit and maybe tap into some advice that you might have for young people who are trying to get a job in the sports industry or break into the sports industry. I'm sure a lot of the people start off as sports fans, and yet it takes a lot more to build a career in the sports industry. What advice would you have for somebody who's looking to pursue that?
Sure. I speak with a lot of young people every month, as you can imagine, get resumes and people looking for internships and jobs. I speak at different schools. That's sports classes, whether it's sports business, sports marketing, several classes up at Penn State, most notably Com 170, which is taught by Mike Poorman, one of the great Penn Staters of all time, as far as I'm concerned. And I always enjoy speaking in that class, and I get a lot of the same questions every semester when I speak about how to break in and what is important. And the first thing that I'll point out that you just mentioned, everybody seems to be a sports fan. That's not what potential employers in the sports industry is looking to hear. I think it's pretty much assumed if a person is vying for a job with a sports related company, they probably are a sports fan. So that's not really going to set you apart. But really, the candidate's ability to and willingness to be available 24/7, to completely devote him or herself to the job, to push expectations and ego aside, and willing to help the organization in any role. And especially when it comes to revenue generation, it's something that I tell young people all the time. Whatever type of company you are applying to within the sports industry, they're all looking to make money. And even if you're not coming in a sales role, tell that company that you feel you can help them generate money, however it might be. I tell young people, see if you can get an internship with a minor league team, whether it's baseball or hockey. A lot of times you'll get exposed to all different aspects of the sports industry if you do that, whether it be in sales, ticketing, game day operations, logistics, all sorts of things. So trying to get a broad-based background so you understand the sports industry from top to bottom. And then really your willingness to be available 24/7 is critical. I mean, unless you're going to be an accountant, let's say, for a team or a league or something like that, there's not too many accounting emergencies at 11 or 12 o'clock at night. But most other jobs within the industry really does require that sort of dedication.
Yeah, it's funny that you bring that up. Both of my daughters have done internships here with the State College Spikes. And I told my oldest daughter, who's interested in the sports business, I said, it's going to be a lot of dizzy bat races and running around with a banana costume on before you start to get to do the things that you really want to do. I mean, it's there are a lot of people vying for these positions, and so you have to differentiate yourself by willing to do what it takes to get to those roles.
For sure.
Talk about the importance of law school to being a sports agent. I know that's the route that you took, but is that an absolute? Is that a requirement to become a sports agent?
Well, in terms of the NFL Players Association, which is the union that represents the players, that is also the body that certifies agents. They have a requirement that you must have some graduate degree. It does not have to be a law degree, some graduate degree. Approximately 50% of the NFL player agents are law graduates. I think that it helps critical thinking skills, issue spotting, the ability to take the worst case scenario out of play for your clients. Those are things that I learned in law school and things that I use on a daily basis that I think are very, very helpful. Contract negotiating skills that you might learn there, of course, are helpful. But as I said earlier, the sales aspect of the job is probably even more important, because the reality is you could be a genius attorney and able to negotiate the world's greatest contract, but if you can't sign a client to negotiate on behalf of, it turns out it's a pretty useless skill. So really that's the main thing. But there's no doubt that the law background helps. But when young people ask me this, I tell them, do not go to law school if your entire 100% sole focus and your life's work is going to be a sports agent. There are other ways where you can get a graduate degree, whether it's in sports management or marketing or advertising, that might allow you to bring more to the table. Now, if you're still a little bit unsure and maybe practicing law or getting into other areas of business is still on the table, then of course, law school is a tremendous thing, and I would recommend it. But it is not, the number one factor, I would say, in turning yourself into a player representative.
This is the People of Penn State. I'm Paul Clifford. I'm joined today by Jim Ivler. He is an NFL player agent. Jim, at the end of each podcast, we like to have a little bit of fun. We call it our lightning round. I'm just going to throw you a couple quick hitter questions, and you just talk about the first thing that comes to mind. So first, your favorite class at Penn State.
Oh, no doubt. My favorite class was the history, philosophy, and politics of the modern Olympics, taught by an outstanding gentleman and professor named John Lucas, who was a foremost leading Olympic historian. Passed about a decade ago, but John was this close to being a U.S. Olympian. I think it was back in the 50s, and he often told that story, but he was just a fascinating lecturer, and his wealth and depth of knowledge about the Olympics was just so impressive. And I know he attended a ton of the Olympic Games, and so that was definitely one of my favorite class. And then within my major, certainly History 143 with Jackson Spielvogel, who was a great Penn State professor as well, was a tremendous class that I enjoyed as well.
And we just did an article about Jackson not too long ago in the Penn Stater magazine, still here in State College. So I'm not going to ask you to pick your favorite client of all time. It's like asking a parent to pick their favorite child. But if you could think about maybe what the most gratifying moment in your career was to date, what would make that list?
Oh, that's hard. I mean, there's so many different clients and stories, and of course the draft. It's hard not to circle back to the draft, because again, it is such a focal point for us every year, and so much effort and energy and time and money goes into the investment of the draft. So I would just generally say anytime that we have a really good draft, as we had a couple weeks ago, that's just always very exciting and fulfilling and energizing. And so there's been, of course, a lot of different drafts, and Penn Staters were involved in a lot of those that went particularly well.
Right. If you could have dinner with anyone, who would it be and why?
Well, if I could have dinner with anyone, I would choose my four grandparents, none of which are here right now, one of whom I never met, my paternal grandfather, who passed before me. I was extremely close to the other three. And so if I could go back, I'd love to sit at a table with all four of them, just one more time and sort of get them up to date what's been going on with me and my family and their two granddaughters who are both Penn State graduates now. And so that would be something I would really relish.
What is the most unusual "we are" moment that you've had? Maybe a place where you saw another Penn Stater and you yelled "we are," or unexpectedly someone recognized you as a Penn Stater and yelled it to you.
I mean, I guess it happens in a lot of different places, and I'm not going to be able to come up with some far-flung destination overseas because I really only traveled overseas once, and that was last year when my younger daughter spent a semester abroad. I do so much domestic travel for my job, and it takes up so much time. There really hasn't been too much time to go to some of those places, but there's certainly been countless places where if you have anything, any sort of Penn State gear on, you obviously hear it, and I would say it's a fairly consistent thing that happens in airports. That's for sure.
Yes, absolutely. Our travel gear, well, in my line of work, my everyday gear is Penn State clothing. So, but when you travel and you go through an airport, I don't know that I've had an occasion where someone hasn't yelled it or someone hasn't come up to talk about their Penn State experience. Your favorite Penn State sport?
Well, I mean, I guess everyone would expect me to say football, so I will say that. It's my business, obviously, how I make my living. So I'm pretty in tune to what's going on with the Penn State football program. But certainly, setting football aside, really thrilled to see that in the last several years we've been able to develop a hockey program thanks to the generosity of the owner of the Buffalo Bills, who I'm very pleased with these days because they also drafted one of my clients and not a Penn Stater, but another player in the third round this year. So really happy to see our hockey program flourishing and in the Big Ten and coming this close to the Frozen Four this year. Hopefully it happens soon.
And finally, your favorite flavor of creamery ice cream?
Bittersweet mint.
Bittersweet mint. That's a popular choice here on the People of Penn State podcast. Well, Jim, I'd like to thank you for joining us on the podcast today. It's alumni like you who allow us to share your story that elevates the value of every Penn State degree. And for that, we're truly grateful. Thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure, Paul. Thank you so much. Love the magazine. We are
Penn State. I also want to thank our producer, John Petishnock. John, thank you for all you've done behind the scenes on this episode, filling in for Vincent Lungaro. If you like this episode, I hope that you'll subscribe to the People of Penn State podcast in your favorite podcast app. And while you're there, go ahead and give us a rating, drop us a review, help us spread the word, and share the podcast to your fellow Penn Staters. If you're a member of the Alumni Association, thank you for your support. If not, what are you waiting for? Go to our website today at alumni.psu.edu, and you too can become a member of the world's largest alumni association. Thanks for tuning in and for all you do for the university, for the glory, and for the future. We are
for the glory of old state, for her founder strong and great, for the future that we wait. Raise the song, raise the song.
Sing our love and loyalty.
Sing our hopes that bright and free.
Rest, O mother dear, with thee. All with thee, all with thee. When we stood at childhood's gate, shapeless in the hands of fate, thou didst mold us, dear old state, dear old state, dear old state.